the dawn of redemption. In the isolated fortress nestled deep within the jungle's embrace, 15-year-old Carter Brown gazed out from the highest tower, mesmerized by the breathtaking view of the misty canopy below. The Renaissance era had brought peace to the land, but within these ancient walls, a different battle raged, one of wits and will between Carter and his reluctant guardian, Avery Smith. "Carter, have you completed your studies?" Avery's stern voice echoed up the spiral staircase of the wizard's tower, where she had brought him 3 months ago. Carter sighed, his creative mind far from the dusty tomes of magical theory. At 53, Avery Smith was the most stubborn woman he had ever met. Her silver-streaked hair always pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. She had been appointed his guardian after the incident, the one that had earned him exile to this remote fortress. "Almost done," he lied, quickly returning to his desk where scrolls lay untouched. The legendary dawn light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across the room. This fortress, once home to the realm's greatest wizards, now housed just the two of them, a determined woman and an imaginative boy, both carrying secrets heavier than the ancient stones around them. Little did Carter know that this particular dawn would mark the beginning of a journey that would test not just his creativity, but the very fabric of his character. The addiction. Avery climbed the tower steps with practiced determination, each footfall echoing her resolve. She had been tasked with one mission: to reform the boy who had unwittingly caused so much harm. "Carter," she said, entering his chamber without knocking, "I know what you've been doing." The boy froze, his hands instinctively covering the small crystal sphere on his desk, his secret, his addiction, his gateway to power. "The sphere of illusions isn't a toy," Avery said, her voice softening slightly. "It's consuming you just as it consumed others before you." Carter's fingers trembled as they caressed the smooth surface of the sphere. "You don't understand. When I use it, I can create entire worlds. I can be anything, anyone." "And that's precisely the problem," Avery replied, approaching slowly. "Reality becomes dull in comparison to the worlds you create. The addiction to illusion has destroyed greater minds than yours." Carter looked up defiantly. "Is that why you brought me here? To take away the one thing that makes me special?" Avery's weathered face showed a flicker of compassion. "No, Carter. I brought you here to save you from becoming like him, like the man who once wielded that sphere to bring our world to the brink of apocalypse." "The war criminal," Carter whispered, the title sending a chill through the warm morning air. Everyone knew the stories of the wizard who had used illusions to manipulate armies, to turn neighbor against neighbor, to nearly destroy civilization itself. "Yes," Avery nodded gravely, "and I was the one who stopped him." The prophet's warning. That evening, as Carter practiced controlling smaller illusions under Avery's watchful eye, a strange figure appeared at the fortress gates. Draped in tattered robes with eyes that seemed to see beyond the physical world, the visitor requested an audience. "I am Alara, prophet of the changing tides," the woman announced as she stood before them in the great hall. "I have traveled far to find the boy with the creative mind and the woman with the determined heart." Avery remained skeptical, her hand never straying far from the dagger at her belt. "What business do you have with us, prophet?" Alara's gaze fixed on Carter. "The sphere you possess is more than a tool for illusions. It is the key to either paradise or apocalypse, the choice of which will soon be yours to make. Carter felt a weight settle in his chest. I don't understand. The war criminal you've heard about, he is stirring again, gathering strength in the shadows. He seeks what you now possess, for only with it can he complete his return. The prophet's voice echoed against the stone walls. You must master the skill of the sphere not to escape reality, but to reshape it when the time comes. Avery stepped forward. You speak in riddles, prophet. If there is danger, speak plainly. Alara smiled sadly. The danger is that the boy will fail the test of intelligence that awaits him. The danger is that he does not yet understand that the villain he fears may be closer than he realizes. With those cryptic words, the prophet departed, leaving Carter and Avery to ponder their meaning as the legendary dawn approached once more. The test begins. Days turned to weeks as Carter's training intensified. Under Avery's strict guidance, he learned to create illusions that were more than mere fantasies. They became tools, extensions of his will. The addiction to escape reality slowly transformed into a discipline to enhance it. You're improving, Avery admitted one evening, a rare compliment that made Carter beam with pride. I've been practicing what you taught me, about anchoring illusions in truth rather than fantasy. Avery nodded approvingly. The strongest deceptions are those woven with threads of reality. That night, as Carter slept, the fortress trembled. He awoke to find the walls of his chamber shifting, melting like wax. The sphere on his bedside table pulsed with an inner light. Avery, he called out, but his voice seemed to disappear into the transforming space around him. The room expanded, contracted, then settled into the form of a vast library he had never seen before. Standing among the endless shelves was a figure Carter recognized from wanted posters and history books, the war criminal himself, Magister Dorn. "Hello, young illusionist," the man said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I've been watching your progress with great interest." Carter reached for the sphere, but it was gone. "This isn't real, you're an illusion." Dorn smiled. "Am I, or is this the first time you're seeing clearly?" He gestured around them. "This is my library, every book a mind I've touched, every shelf a life I've influenced, including your guardians." Avery, Carter felt confusion cloud his thoughts. "Oh yes, did she tell you how she stopped me? Did she mention that she was my most promising student before her betrayal?" Dorn pulled a book from the shelf, opening it to reveal moving images of a younger Avery, creating illusions alongside the man she would later help imprison. "You're lying," Carter insisted, though doubt had begun to creep in. "Am I? Ask yourself this. Why would the realm's most determined hunter of dark magic keep the sphere of illusions rather than destroy it? Why isolate you in this fortress rather than return you to your family?" Dorn's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps the test of intelligence begins with questioning who the real villain is in your story." The library dissolved, and Carter found himself back in his bed, sweating and confused. The sphere sat innocently on his table, no longer glowing. Was it a dream, an illusion, or something more? Heaven versus hell. The following days became a personal hell for Carter as doubt poisoned his relationship with Avery. He watched her more carefully, noted how expertly she handled the sphere when demonstrating techniques, remembered her cryptic comments about understanding the war criminal's methods. "You were his student, weren't you?" Carter finally confronted her one morning as they broke their fast. Avery's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down slowly. "Who told you that?" "He did, in a dream or an illusion. He showed me." The silence between them stretched taut as a bowstring. Finally, Avery nodded. "Yes, I was his student long ago, before I understood what he planned to do with our art." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would you have trusted me if I had?" Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Would you have believed that someone could walk the path toward darkness and then turn back?" Carter considered this. "Is that what you're trying to teach me, that I can turn back from addiction to the sphere?" "That and more." Avery stood, her determination evident in every line of her body. "I'm teaching you that our choices define who we are, not our past mistakes. Dorn chose power over people. I chose duty over desire. What will you choose, Carter Brown?" Before he could answer, the fortress shook violently. This was no illusion. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the distant sound of an explosion echoed through the corridors. "He's here," Avery whispered, fear and resolve mingling in her voice. "Sooner than I expected." The final illusion. The attack came swiftly. Soldiers bearing Dorn's insignia poured through a breach in the fortress wall, their movements too coordinated, too precise to be mere mercenaries. Carter and Avery fled to the wizard's tower, sealing magical barriers behind them. "We need to use the sphere," Carter insisted as they reached the top chamber. "Together, we could create an illusion powerful enough to confuse them, to make them fight each other instead of us." Avery shook her head. "That's exactly what he wants, for us to use the sphere's full power. It would create a beacon, revealing its exact location to him." "Then what do we do?" Carter demanded, panic rising in his throat. Avery placed her hands on his shoulders. "You pass the test. You prove that you understand what defines reality." She pressed the sphere into his hands. "Create an illusion, Carter, not to escape, but to reveal the truth." As the sounds of fighting grew closer, Carter closed his eyes, holding the sphere between his palms. He thought of everything he had learned, about anchoring illusions in truth, about choices defining character, about the fine line between heaven and hell. The sphere grew warm, then hot, pulsing with his creative energy. When he opened his eyes, the chamber was filled with a swirling mist that gradually formed into a perfect replica of himself, holding an identical sphere. "Is this your plan?" he asked Avery. "A decoy?" "No," she replied softly. "Look closer." As Carter studied his doppelganger, he noticed subtle differences: a coldness in the eyes, a tension in the posture, a darkness that seemed to emanate from within. "This is who I could become," he realized aloud, "if I continue down the path of addiction." The illusion shifted, aging before his eyes, growing more like Dorn with each passing moment until the transformation was complete. The war criminal stared back at him, wearing his face. "The hero was the villain all along," Carter whispered, understanding the prophet's warning at last. "Not you, me. I could become him." The door to the chamber burst open, and Dorn himself stood framed in the doorway, his actual presence far more terrifying than any illusion. "Impressive," the war criminal said, eyeing the illusion of himself. "You've taught the boy well, Avery." "He taught himself the most important lesson," Avery replied, stepping protectively in front of Carter. Dorn extended his hand. "The sphere, boy, give it to me, and I'll show you wonders beyond your imagination." Carter looked from the sphere to the illusion he had created, to Avery's determined stance, and finally to Dorn's outstretched hand. In that moment, he understood the true test of intelligence, recognizing the difference between power and wisdom. "No," he said simply, and with a surge of will, he directed the full force of the sphere's energy not outward, but inward into the crystal itself. The sphere shattered in his hands, fragments scattering across the floor like stars falling from the heavens. Each shard contained a portion of its power, but none enough to fuel the apocalypse Dorn had planned. "No," Dorn lunged forward, but it was too late. The fragments dissolved into motes of light that swirled around the chamber before dispersing through the windows to the dawn sky beyond. Priorities changed. The aftermath came with a strange sense of peace. Without the sphere to amplify his powers, Dorn was captured by the fortress guards who had remained loyal to Avery. The prophet Alara returned, revealing herself to be an agent of the realm who had been tracking Dorn's movements. As they stood on the fortress walls, watching the legendary dawn break over the jungle canopy, Carter felt lighter than he had in months. "I don't feel the craving anymore," he told Avery. "For the sphere, for the illusions." Avery smiled, the stubborn set of her jaw softening. "That's because you found something more valuable than escape." "Reality," Carter nodded, "as complicated and imperfect as it is." "And duty," Avery added. "You chose the greater good over personal power. That's a rare quality in one so young." Carter looked out at the breathtaking view, seeing it truly for the first time without the filter of wanting to improve it or escape from it. "What happens now?" "Now," Avery said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "we rebuild. The realm will need new protectors, new visionaries who understand both the allure and danger of power." "Together," Carter asked, surprised at how much he had come to value this stubborn, determined woman's guidance. "Together," Avery confirmed, "your creativity balanced by my determination. I think we make a rather good team." As the sun rose fully above the horizon, bathing the fortress in golden light, Carter felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. The addiction that had nearly consumed him had been transformed into a path toward redemption, not just for himself, but perhaps for others who would face similar temptations. "I think I'd like that," he said, his imagination already filling with possibilities not of escape, but of growth and healing. That night, as Carter prepared for sleep in his chamber, now permanently free of the sphere's influence, Avery came to bid him good night. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Rest well, tomorrow we begin anew." As she turned to leave, Carter called after her, "Avery, thank you for not giving up on me." She paused in the doorway, her silhouette framed against the torchlight beyond. "Some relationships provide redemption, Carter. Ours has provided it for us both." With that, she closed the door softly, leaving Carter to drift toward sleep with a mind full not of fantastical illusions, but of real possibilities for the future. A future where his creativity would build rather than escape, where his imagination would inspire rather than deceive. And as the fortress settled into the quiet rhythms of night, Carter Brown, once addicted to illusions, now committed to reality, whispered to himself the question that would guide his journey forward. What truly defines reality? Not what we can imagine, but what we choose to make real through our actions. With that thought warming his heart, he closed his eyes and surrendered to honest dreams. Good night.